Before we begin, turn off your lights. Some places exist between the living and the dead, places where the air feels wrong, where the silence is too deep, too heavy, like something is holding its breath, where something or someone is always watching. Tonight we travel to one of those places. Welcome to Eldermoor, a village with no visitors, no laughter, no light, just shadows, and the things that live inside them. My name doesn't matter. What matters is this story. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. What happened in Eldermoor was real. Every cursed place has a beginning. A single moment when everything changed. When the ordinary world cracked open and let something dark crawl through. For Eldermoor, that moment came over 200 years ago. The village was once alive. Farmers worked the fields at dawn. Children played near the river at dusk. People laughed. People loved. And then, the disappearances began. It started with a child, a little girl named Mara. 7 years old, golden curls, a laugh that could light up any room she walked into. One evening in late October, she ran to the edge of the woods to catch fireflies. Her mother watched from the doorway, smiling. And then, Mara was gone, not kidnapped, not lost. Gone, as if the darkness had simply swallowed her whole. The villagers searched for days. They combed the woods, dragged the river, knocked on every door. They found nothing, not a shoe, not a ribbon, not even a single footprint in the mud at the tree line. Then the second child vanished, then a farmer, then an elderly woman who lived alone at the edge of town. The survivors called it the Shadow, an ancient thing, not a ghost, not a demon, something older than both. They said it fed on fear, that it could smell panic the way a wolf smells blood, that it came on the full moon, and it never left empty-handed. Over time, the remaining villagers abandoned Eldermoor. They boarded up their homes, packed what little they could carry, and walked away, without looking back. Because they knew, if you looked back at Eldermoor, you might see what was standing there. That was the legend. The kind of story you pass around a campfire. The kind that makes you laugh nervously and sleep with every light in the house on. Most people are smart enough to leave a story like that alone. These four friends were not. It was October, the kind of night that smells like dead leaves and cold air. The kind of night that begs you to do something you'll regret. Jake had found the village on an old surveyor's map. Ryan brought the cameras. Sophia packed the flashlights. And Nora brought a voice recorder because she'd read that shadow entities leave audio traces behind. They drove 2 hours through winding forest roads, past towns that grew quieter and quieter until the GPS lost signal entirely and they were navigating by paper map and gut instinct. When they finally saw Eldermoor through the tree line, they stopped the car and sat in complete silence. Even from a distance, the village felt wrong. The buildings were intact, far too intact for a place abandoned over a century ago. The doors were shut. The windows were dark. Everything was perfectly, impossibly still. "It's just an old village," Jake said. His voice sounded too loud in the silence. Nobody agreed with him, but they got out of the car anyway. The moment they crossed into Eldermoor, the temperature dropped, not slightly, sharply, like walking through a wall of solid cold. Sophia clicked on her flashlight. The beam barely cut through the dark. "Did you hear that?" Ryan whispered. They all had. A sound, low, almost below the range of hearing. Not quite a voice, not quite wind. Something that wanted to be heard. They moved deeper into Eldermoor. Their footsteps on the cobblestone sounded wrong, too sharp, too hollow, like the ground beneath them was completely empty. Ryan's camera kept cutting to static, white bursts of noise every few minutes, blanketing the image before snapping back. In one frame, just before the static cleared, he thought he saw a shape standing in the background. He didn't show the others. They reached the well at the center of the village. Old stone, crusted in moss so thick it looked almost alive. No rope, no bucket, just a black opening that seemed to descend forever. Nora held her recorder over the edge. Pressed record. The sounds that rose back up from the darkness did not sound like wind. They sounded like names. Jake grabbed Nora's arm. "We need to move!" But before they could step back, Sophia screamed, "Behind you!" They spun around, and for just 1 second, one single, terrible second, they saw it. Not a person, not an animal. A shape made entirely of darkness, taller than any man, with no face, only 2 pale points of light where its eyes should have been. And then it was gone. They ran, down the cobblestone path, through the crushing silence, lungs burning, until Ryan's foot caught a root and he hit the ground hard. The others didn't stop. They didn't even look back. Ryan scrambled to his feet. His camera was still rolling. He could hear the others running ahead of him. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. And behind him, very slowly, he could hear footsteps. Ryan caught up with the others near the edge of the woods. They were standing completely still in front of a narrow gap between 2 dying trees. Beyond the tree line, barely visible in the dark, was a shrine. None of them had seen it on the map. None of them had expected it. But there it was, a stone structure, no taller than a man, surrounded by dozens of candles. The candles were lit. Nora stepped forward first. Carved into the face of the shrine were names, cut deep into the stone, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Men, women, children. At the very top, almost worn away by centuries of wind and rain, was the name Mara. "This wasn't built to worship the shadow," Nora whispered. "This was built to feed it." The villagers hadn't just abandoned Eldermoor. They had made a deal with whatever lived here. Sacrifices. Names offered willingly to the darkness in exchange for their own survival. And the shrine was still active, because someone or something was still lighting those candles. Sophia's voice dropped to almost nothing. "Jake, look at the newest names." He looked. The 4 names carved freshest into the stone, still pale with new cuts, still sharp at the edges, were theirs. They ran. No plan, no strategy. Just pure animal terror, driving 4 people through total darkness as fast as their bodies would allow. The shadow came for them. They couldn't see it. They couldn't hear it. They could only feel it. A cold that moved with them. A pressure building at the edges of their vision. The absolute certainty, deep in their bones, that something enormous was only a few steps behind. Nora's recorder was still running in her jacket pocket. She didn't know it at the time, but later, back in the safety of her apartment, hands shaking, lights blazing, she pressed play and listened. Underneath their screaming, underneath the pounding of their feet, on the ground, a voice, deep and slow and completely calm, whispering their names, one by one. They reached the car. Jake got the engine running before his door was even shut. They didn't look back. They didn't speak. They drove until the trees disappeared, until the road turned normal again, until the first gas station lights appeared on the horizon. Only then did they breathe. They made it out of Eldermoor, all 4 of them. But here is what none of them ever spoke about. Not to each other, not to anyone. In the weeks that followed, Each of them began waking at the exact same time every single night. 3 a.m. every night, lying in the dark, heart hammering, with the absolute unshakable feeling that something was standing in the corner of the room, watching, waiting. The shadow doesn't need Eldermoor. It never did. It only needs to know your name. And now, it knows yours. If this story stayed with you, good. It's supposed to. Hit that like button if you made it to the end without turning a light on. Subscribe to Nightmare, narrated for brand new horror every single week. And drop a comment below. Have you ever woken up at 3 a.m. with the feeling that something was in the room? We read every comment, even the ones sent at 3 in the morning. Sleep well if you can.